let's talk about the Houston Rockets. They went sort of all in, and it sort of worked. Let's recap the season. Michael Bolton, big Rocket guy.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I was going to get Harrison Butker to do the introduction to this show, but he was a little bit intimidated by my masculinity. Also, the fact that I can kick further than him. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA, as my phone goes off, LOCKEDONNBA for your $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We're available for you to double bang on all platforms. So we're here to talk Houston Rockets in this show. What an interesting season. I was relatively critical of their off-season plan. Pretty critical. I didn't, under the Fred VanVleet stuff, totally understand that. Going after Brook Lopez didn't make any sense to me. The Dillon Brooks stuff, I was very, very worried about paying Dillon Brooks that level of money and him thinking that he's going to be the man and taking all these shots and stifling some development. Well, they improved unbelievably. Like, that level of improvement is just something you don't see. Will it work long term? I don't know, but it looks like that their moves were 100% the right thing to do. They've still got some logjam stuff, but a huge, huge offseason from Rafael Stone, and I think it worked, and I was wrong. There you go. For those of you who love to jerk off over that stuff, clip that little part of me saying I'm wrong, because I know that some of you think I never say that, even though I feel like I say it every day. The Rockets were great. It was, well, great. Great. Let's say great. Was it the off-season player personnel decisions? Was it the fact that they got a real coach and not literally the worst coach in the NBA, Stephen Silas? Look, he's gone and he went and worked his magic in Detroit. Was it bringing in Ime Udoka? Could have been. Not sure. But they're stacked with talent at the moment. And it is going to be really interesting to see where this team goes now. We'll talk a little bit about that coming up in a second. Let's just go through the overall sort of outlook for the Rockets. Or not the outlook, what happened during the season. That's better phrasing. They finished 41-41. Yes, 500. A 2.1 plus 2.1 net rating. 20th best offense. And for a team that had the most unwatchable defense, the stuff they did under Silas was embarrassing. They were the 7th best defense. And that is, some of it is personnel with VanVleet and Brooks, but it's also Udoka. It's getting a real coach in who knows how to teach things defensively and those players. Hard to know where to apportion all the credit, but that was that's it. That's real. I'm not saying that's the only reason they jumped up, but that's it. That's the reason, right? And this is also a really weird team because when we headed into the preseason, we were like, what's going to happen here? They got Kevin Porter Jr. Is he going to be their 6th man? Is he going to start? Remember that? Remember Kevin Porter Jr.? People were thinking that he was going to start over Dillon Brooks and they'd run with him and Green and VanVleet all together, or that VanVleet would be the 6th. It was crazy stuff. And now, like, obviously, Kevin Porter used up all of his shitbloke points and he's done. I don't think he'll ever come back. I don't think so, but who knows? And that's like that was just a weird time to think back. September, the discussion was, will Kevin Porter start or will he come off the bench and how will he handle that? Weird. Their preseason over-under was 31.5. Now, I haven't actually checked where I had them, but I'm going to tell you now, I didn't have them there because I said that is one of the biggest single-season leaps that you could look at given where they were the year before. I think they were 19 or 20 wins maybe the year before. You don't see 10-game jumps that often. But maybe, honestly, maybe in this NBA you do. We had a lot of gigantic drops and gigantic leaps this season. So where did I have Houston? I had them jumping up, actually, to 28 wins was my first pass at it. I settled on 29, so I still picked the under, and they embarrassed the over-under. They were 10 over it. So that is just a huge, huge L. Okay, I'll live with that. Very hard, I think, for me to... What did they actually win the year before? 22 games. Very hard for me to suggest that a team will come out and win 19 extra games. That's a tough projection to make, but they did it, so well done. In the draft, they lost their pick. They don't have it. It ended up going to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Pick 12, so they don't have their own pick. Doesn't matter, because they got the Nets pick as part of the James Harden trade, and that jumped up all the way to number 3. So they have pick number 3. After having pick number 4 last season, after having pick number 2 the year before that, and pick number 2 the year before that. 2, 2. Yeah, 2, 2. 2, 2. 4, 3. Haven't got pick 1, but that's an insane level of draft assets. Plus, a guy that should have been top 5 in his draft in Şengün. Plus, a guy that probably should have been top 10 in his draft in Whitmore. It's loaded, man. This team is loaded. They're not quite on the level of the Thunder in terms of scary futures, but honestly, they're not far off. So they get Brooklyn's pick at pick 33, or pick 3. They've also got pick 44, which isn't their own pick. That's the Warriors' second round pick. That's not a great second, but it's not bad. But that guy's just not going to have anywhere to play really on this team, is he? And who knows whether they keep it. Their most common starting group was the starting group that started like 45, 50 games. VanVleet, Jaylen Green, Dylan Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr. and Alperen Şengün, the delicate dancer. That is not a shock. It is a little bit of a shock to see that their best lineup was not that group. The difference was Jeff Green instead of Jabari Smith. That was a plus 6.8. It's not, it's a decent minutes. It's not a super, super strong lineup. But it's basically their main guys with Jeff in there at 38 years of age over Jabari Smith. And we'll talk about Jabari a little bit later. He had a weird year. Their free agents coming up. There's not a lot happening here. The 3 restricted guys, Nate Hinton and Nate Williams, also known as Jonathan Williams, and Jermaine Samuels. Did you know that any of these guys played for this team? All two-way guys, all never saw the court, all with no real significant future. The only guy I'd look at is Nate/Jonathan Williams, maybe as a future back-end rotation player, but there's no real future in those guys. And then even when we look at the unrestricted guys, there's not a lot there either. It's Aaron Holiday. It's Reggie Bullock, who we thought might actually have a role, but I think he just might be washed. And it's Boban Marjanovic, who just is there for vibes, and that is it. And at some point, he's going to retire, you would guess. But they're the only... Maybe they bring Aaron Holiday back, but no guarantee of that. Bullock did nothing. Boban's a vibes guy. That's it. That's all they do. 2 guys with team options. This is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Jeff Green has an almost $10 million team option. The wild thing, Jae'Sean Tate has a similar sized team option. I would be... I don't mind bringing Jeff Green back, just giving some stability in that second unit. But also remember, they have Steven Adams now. Yeah, Steven Adams plays for this team. So Jeff Green playing a lot of that small ball center. You've got Smith and Şengün there as well. You get hopefully a healthy season. I didn't even talk about Tari Eason before. Of Tari Eason, I'm not sure. It depends what they need to do in free agency. I'm not sure that Green is necessary there. And also Tate, realistically, just shouldn't play. He's gotten worse as a passer. He's not a good shooter. There are plenty of other guys to play those minutes. Maybe the team just declines Tate's team option and so that Udoka just has no option. Like, just won't play him. And that sometimes happens. I hate that disconnect sometimes between front offices and coaching, where the front office has to go, just get this guy off my team because I know you're going to play him incorrectly. It's the Jameer Nelson over Jamal Murray situation for the Nuggets. Remember that? When the front office had to just dump Jameer Nelson to another team because Michael Malone just refused to go to any other direction than his trusted veteran, even though it was very clear what the right decision was. Sometimes coaches get put into the right or find the right answers through somebody pushing their head down onto it, making them read. Maybe you could use that with a green screen. I don't know. You can do what you want. The only non-guarantee currently on the roster is the big fella, Jock Landale, who has 3 more non-guaranteed years at $8 million each. The contract was wild. 4 years, $32 million. And then we found out that it was a non-guaranteed each of those years. Landale was embarrassingly bad. Embarrassing is unfair. Sorry, Jock. He was bad. And then he was pretty good at the end. Like, I thought really good at the end of the season. So I don't think they're going to guarantee Landale and pick up Green's team option. And I would think, even though Landale's much older than you think, he's 28, I think that he would be the guy that you bring back and you save a little bit of money there as well. And they've got 4 guys who are going to be on expiring contracts outside of some of the other non-guarantee guys I already talked about. One of them is Fred VanVleet. He's got a team option on that gigantic contract, so that didn't come out in the initial reporting. You would think that they picked that up given how he's been playing. Steven Adams is going to be expiring. And then you've got the two rookies who are both extension eligible this summer, Jaylen Green and Alperen Şengün. So both of those will be restricted if they don't sign extensions in this coming offseason. So there are a lot of things happening with this Rockets team because, again, they have just really... They've had some lottery luck, obviously, getting all those top picks, like we said. But it's not just that. There are some smooth moves, some savvy moves to get them into the position that they currently are. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Yes, it's BetterHelp. Sometimes we need that opportunity to get something off our chests. Are you frustrated that your team was up 2-0 in a playoff series and then had to come home for the next two games and then lost them both? Are you frustrated that you live in Minnesota? Are those two things tied together? I don't know. But sometimes you need someone, sorry for the strays, sometimes you need just that opportunity to get something off your chest to somebody unbiased in your life. And that could be one of the avenues of therapy. Now, that's not what you're going to be paying for therapy for. Hey, I want to tell you how bad my team is. But talking through that stuff, which might bother you, it might bother you to an amount that it doesn't need to. But coping strategies, working through prioritization of problems in your life, these are all the things that therapists can do. It doesn't have to be, hey, I need to talk about these things because, 20 of my family members died all at once and I'm the only person who can be sad in the world. That's not how it works. There are many different things that impact us in many different ways. And sometimes it's about attacking the acute problem and sometimes it's about how we can go through and figure out how to deal with some stuff on our own. And that's where therapy can also help. So, as therapy is different for everybody, BetterHelp is flexible and it's suited to your schedule because we know that everybody's different. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Okay, so let's take a look at the starters on this team. Now, for most of these teams that I've done, I think every single one of them, I've had 6 to 7 guys in my group of starters. These are the potential starters. Honestly, as much as I like some of the players that are on this bench of this team, I think their starting group, their most common starting group, I don't really see any change coming whatsoever. Unless they make trades or something, I think there'd be no reason for me to think that VanVleet, Green, Brooks, Smith, and Şengün is not the starting 5 locked in to start next season. As much, again, I like the players on the bench, but what change do they actually make there? I'm not sure they make any. Let's talk VanVleet. It's pretty easy to be down on VanVleet in draft season. As you can see, ADP was 29. But he killed it again. 23rd in -1, 13th on Yahoo, 30th in points leagues. He averaged 17.5 points. We know that he's not a high scorer. 3 threes, 4 rebounds, 8 assists, 1.4 steals, and 0.8 blocks. Now, those steal numbers are down from what he did in the past, and the block numbers are up. But we know what happened. And we also know that over the second half of the season is that the way that the NBA was weirdly adjudicating blocks, there was so many of these guys, CJ McCollum, Fred VanVleet. Who was the other one? There was another guard who was just putting up these insane block numbers. You go, this isn't real. What's going on here? And then there was brought to attention about VanVleet. A lot of graphics put out, first player under 6 foot or 6'1" to block this many shots. And then it went away. And they changed that sort of designation of a strip going up for the ball is a block or a steal. And in the end, we ended with 1.4 steals and 0.8 blocks. We know this whether there was that weird sort of rule change, rule interpretation change from the NBA in terms of not giving as many fouls and the scoring all dropped after the All-Star break. But that also happened, and this never got mentioned, but I'm sure that there was a bit of a worded email that went around. So scorers, like, these aren't blocks. Make the blocks actually blocks. Because VanVleet, after the All-Star break, averaged half a block a game and 1.9 steals. What a shocker that is. Like, back to combined 2.4 when he was at 2.2 for the season. And it's not a surprise. So when we look at this, as much as steals are a variable category, I think we knock the blocks, we bump the steals when we look at it next season. 42 from the field, 86 from the line, 39 from 3. Honestly, improved as a field goal guy. He is 30. There is going to be he's 6 foot tall. Maybe he's 6 foot tall. There is going to be a huge drop from VanVleet at some point. I don't think it'll be this season. I think we've got 1 to 2 more years. But don't be shocked if we get him getting Kyle Lowry at some point, where these 17 points become 12 points. He gets by on some steals and assists, but he just can't do it over time. His best comps for this last season was year 9 of Darren Collison when he was in Indiana, and year 7 of George Hill when he was in Indiana. And I think they're pretty reasonable comps. I think VanVleet's probably a better player than both of those guys, but the lower scoring, high assists, good defense, solid three-point shooting is what all those guys bring. You'll also realize that Hill and Collison for other reasons like allegedly beating his misses, their time in the NBA dropped pretty quickly after that. So, yeah, that's where I do worry about the cliff for VanVleet. That's why if I had Amen Thompson, or if the Rockets draft a point guard at number 3, which I just don't know what they're going to do, what I feel they shouldn't do is draft Donovan Clingan there. I've been pretty clear on that. That I just think VanVleet, yes, next season in that team option, which maybe they pick up, but after that, I'm not sure he's starter caliber. But he was awesome. 96th percentile EPM, 94th CPM. I wrote the rim defense here as 32nd percentile. You go, why does that matter? Well, it is tying into the blocks. Like average 0.8 blocks, but again, that's not because he was defending the rim. So again, those numbers are fake. Like we saw what happened with him. We saw what they were. He's not a shot blocker. So we don't count any of that. But he was great. I expect him to be a third roundish sort of guy again. I don't expect the reins are getting handed over. And he was honestly just perfect for what this team needed. So was Alperen Şengün. Now, Şengün suffered that serious-looking ankle injury at the end of the season, but thankfully, it's not an ACL. Thankfully, it wasn't a fracture that required surgery. Mitchell Robinson having his second surgery today on his ankle, by the way. He's going to be ready to go for the preseason, all systems go. Şengün is still not even 22 years of age. He played 63 games and 32 minutes a night, and you know what I thought about Şengün. You know that I had him top 5 in his draft class before the draft. You know that I've been banging the drum of how good he can be fantasy-wise, a top 20 player. But you also know that I was a bit skeptical about this season because A, the Rockets tried to get a center to play over him in Brook Lopez, and B, Ime Udoka, maybe like Steven Silas, would place defensive blame on Şengün. And it happened a couple of times, but overall Şengün improved significantly as a defender. But we also saw when Şengün went down, they played Jabari and Amen at center, really. And then the team went on this huge run. Is that to say that Şengün's bad or they're not going to focus on him? I don't think so. But as much as I like Şengün, as much as I value Şengün as a player, as good as I think he is, I am still yet to be fully convinced that the Rockets feel the same way. And that, if I'm in dynasty formats, that means I don't change any valuation of Şengün. But in terms of where we head next season for redraft, I'm like, are they going to do it? Are they going to actually even more commit, or will they see what happened at the end of last season plus the return or the arrival of Steven Adams and go, well, maybe Şengün doesn't do enough? I'm a little, Again, it sounds like I don't like him. I'm just worried about how they view him. 36th in -1, 23rd in points. His ADP was 61. I think what I said about him was he was either going to be top 30 or outside the top 80 because I don't play him enough. And I guess I was close enough to being right there when he was 36th in -1. He averaged 21 and 9 with 5 assists and 1.2 steals. Shot 54 from the field, 69 from the line. That is a little bit of a problem. 30% on 3. I'm not sure he ever gets there as a 3-point shooter, but you'd hope he could get to 34 consistently. He turns it over, but as a center with a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, you definitely take that. I think it's always worth mentioning, if anyone mentions a player in their fantasy rank and their turnovers, that you always mention the assists along with that. It's all well and good to have 1.1 turnovers, but if you average 2 assists, then it doesn't actually matter that much. What I was honestly staggered by, now you'll say, Josh, if you're listening on audio, you say this. If you're watching on video, you know the answer already. But if you're watching on or listening on audio, you'll be like, you'll be like, I've got to go double bang this, first of all. But you'll be saying, well, Josh is going to talk about the crafted similarities now. So it's going to be Jokic, it's going to be Sabonis, it's going to be white centers who pass. Yes, that's what you'll think. Well, the top 2 similarities were year 3 of Greg Monroe, and the second similarity was year 2 of Greg Monroe. I went, what? Greg Monroe, okay. Greg Monroe, one of those guys that is sort of out of an era. Started off really well. Developed really good passing skills. Couldn't shoot, didn't hit free throws, great rebounder, solid offensive guy, not a bad defender, a little bit underrated. Passed at an underrated level. but ended up just out of the league so quickly. Now, I don't think that's going to happen to Şengün. He's way better, way more offensive touch, way more moves, runs and offense. But they were staggering to me. He was 91st percentile Şengün in EPM and 76th in CPM. And his defensive crafted defensive plus minus was 63rd percentile. So again, he improved unbelievably. Again, this doesn't mean that he's he's a great defensive player. But I think the notion of him being a bad defensive player should be thrown out. We just need the Rockets to be fully convinced of that. So, love Şengün. Huge upside. Still unbelievably young. Still have some concerns about how Houston use him. But I think we should have concerns about a lot of the Rockets players just because of how many guys are there and how they figure them all out and how we get enough of a role and enough playing time for these guys consistently. It might take a year or two to thin it all out. Today's episode is brought to you by the GameTime app. GameTime is an authorized marketplace for NBA tickets, and with the playoffs on literally right now, if you want to go to an NBA playoff game, well, GameTime is where you get the tickets, because as the timer ticks down, as we get closer to each game, GameTime actually drops the prices of the tickets. You don't get this pricing, well, something's happening, you want to go, you got to, Rudy Gobert, show me the money. You don't have to do that. The prices will drop as you get closer to game time. Plus, so many other different features. Flash deals. They send that alert on your phone. They go, hey, something happening in your area tonight. You want to go? And you go, what else am I doing? Picking pizza crumbs out of my belly button? I'll go. Off we go. And you get the tickets. Views from your seat. But what if I go? Am I going to see something good? Or am I going to be stuck behind a pole? As I would be at the club on a Friday night. No. You're there, out there, great seats, and you can see them. Is this worth my money? Absolutely. Is it worth it? Maybe not. Let's try something different. GameTime has all of these great features. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets. Lowest price guaranteed. I'm sure you guys don't have your views obscured by a poll on a Friday night. Sure, you're all very, very wholesome, and that's, you wouldn't even know what I'm talking about there, in fact. Maybe you think you're going to some sort of architecture forum and they're just talking about beams and lintels. Lintel? That's lintel. That's the right word, isn't it? Shout out architecture. Okay, let's get back into talking about some more of these starters on this team. So we've done two of them because we are just running slow. What else have I got to do? Let's talk Jabari Smith, who I'd say was a little bit disappointing as a rookie. From a fantasy perspective anyway, I was disappointed from what I thought he could do. We were a bit hesitant about where he would be this season. In the end, I think he sort of just lived up to the expectation. So sort of back on track. He's only 21, 76 games and 32 minutes. There's still going to be the risk here of like him and Şengün and Eason and Adams and where do the minutes go? But we're heading into year 3 here for Smith, and that is honestly where a lot of guys turn it up. He was 102nd in -1. He was 63rd if you look at Yahoo again. Don't draft him in round 6. You will lose. ADP was 92, so just bang on. 14 points, 2 threes, 8 rebounds, 0.7 steals and 0.8 blocks. And part of the reason that his fantasy appeal was so high coming out of Auburn was really good block numbers, really good steal numbers, and that just hasn't come at all. He shot 45 from the field and 81 from the line. So he does take a lot of threes, but you want that 53% 2-point number to jump up. And that was one of the problems for him coming out of college. It's like, why? Well, this guy just can't really finish from 2-point range. And that has translated across, which we didn't want it to. The two best comps for him, which I find really interesting. Rookie year Lauri Markkanen. So not breakout Lauri Markkanen, but rookie year Lauri Markkanen was pretty good. And year 2 Punch Bob, Bobby Portis. Both Bulls players. So both of those guys have turned into very different players, I think, to what we thought Smith would be. Both of those guys, Portis and Markkanen, you would suggest they would be on the lower end of defensive abilities, whereas Smith was thought to be a very good defensive player with shooting and offensive upside. So he's got a lot to work on defensively then. 61st percentile on EPM, 32nd on crafted, and his rim defense frequency was only the 49th percentile, and that's a worry, because when you're playing with Şengün, who's not a rim protector, I would have thought that they would have tried to rotate things out more to get Smith in there to protect the rim, And that's a little worry. So does that mean that we get Şengün playing a little at the 4 with Adams at the 5? Smith played at center down the stretch of the season. I thought was pretty good, but that number needs to be higher. For him to really for him to jump into a top 60 player, sure, it'd be great if he scored 18 a night. That's probably not happening here. It's going to 1.5 blocks and 1 steal. And at the moment, he's not being put in position or putting himself in position to do that. Let's talk about another young player who was picked at number 2, and that is Jaylen Green. What an interesting season. He is only 22. They're so young. Smith, Şengün, Green, 21 or 22. 82 games, all of them, 32 minutes a night. He was drafted at pick 76. Interestingly, even in a points league, he did not hit that number. Yes, of course, he played all 82 games, so the totals will, get excited. But on a per-game basis, he didn't hit that, which is disappointing for a top 2 pick in year 3 to not take that step forward. But for category leagues, he was by far the best that he's ever been. 103rd in -1, and Yahoo has him 92nd. He averaged 19.6 points with 2.5 threes, 5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 0.8 steals, and 0.3 blocks. And we're 3 years in. I think we can feel okay about saying the defense is never coming. But what was impressive is the assists being solid enough, rebounds going up, scoring being better, and efficiency going up somewhat. 42 from the field, 80 from the line, shot 50% from 2s, 33 from 3. That's part of the problem is the 3-point shooting. That needs to be better. But we also know that in March, he had one of the most red-hot streaks I've ever seen. I think he was a top 5 player for 3 weeks. After the All-Star break, Jaylen was where was he? He was unbelievably high. I'd say he is a top 50 player, but it is worth remembering that it was like a 3 or 4 week hot streak. And after that, he went back to being bad Jaylen Green. And before that, well, not bad, he went back to being mid Jaylen Green. Before that hot streak, he was getting benched. He was playing 24 minutes a night, and they were just saying, we don't think so, mate. We're going to go with more men. We're going to go with more Cam, and you are just not going to, you're going to play 25 minutes. And that's when, of course, I went, all right, he's a bad fantasy player with a bad fantasy profile who's getting benched. I don't think we roster Jaylen Green. And about 2 weeks later, he averaged 40 minutes a night with 40 points on 70% shooting. But it was fake. The shooting was fake. It was clearly fake. It will remain fake. I hate these 2 comparisons. Rookie year, Jaden Hardy. Remember, the comparisons are not based on, when you say Jaden Hardy barely played as a rookie, they're not based on how many minutes and stats did you accumulate. It's about things like shooting quality, deflections, turnovers, rim defense, passing, creation, load. And you could see if Jaden Hardy went to a team like Houston, and Hardy was supposed to be a high pick, and he went to a team like this, he would have put up, I think, very similar numbers to Jaylen, probably less efficient though. And the other one is fantasy loser RJ Barrett in year 3. Don't get defensive, Raptors and Barrett fans. Barrett has been terrible at fantasy, apart from the 30-odd games that he played for Toronto. They are terrible fantasy comparisons. 61st percentile, Jaylen Green was in EPM, 40th in CPM. In year 3, he needs to get to the line more, 64th percentile only. So meaning that the hot streak came because he was just relying upon extreme outlier shooting. And as you see for the season, that's not what he brings. So while it was great that Jaylen was able to do all of this, I am absolutely still concerned about where this goes. With Amen Thompson there, with Cam Whitmore there, with maybe a guard coming in at pick 3, where does he go? If you can't give him a max extension, you cannot do it. He was great, but you do get the feeling that both him and Şengün can't really coexist if you want to get the optimized version of this team. They can play together, fine. But to optimize the team, I don't think you can have both guys there together. I think we sort of saw that. I'm still relatively skeptical about him reaching a consistently high level. Maybe you aren't. The last starter is your mate, my mate, Texas Lou Dort. It's Dylan Brooks. He's only 28, Brooksy. 72 games, 31 minutes. I was really worried about that contract. What is his contract? What are you doing? Who else is paying Dylan Brooks this money? Is Dylan Brooks going to come in and say, I'm getting paid $80 million, I need all the shots? And I that was a worry. But I also there was this ridiculous narrative about Brooks that maybe I perpetuate. I probably did feed into it a little bit, but I also pointed this out many times. The idea was that Dillon Brooks comes in and takes all the shots away from all the good players. And I did point out, as much as I am not a Dillon Brooks guy, I think you know that, I said that when he played with Jaren, Desmond Bane, and Ja Morant, he'd have like 15 usage. So he actually did know how to pull his head in. The problem is that when some of those guys were out, he was like, it's Dillon Brooks time. And my worry was on a team like Houston with unestablished players that he would just think it's Dillon Brooks time the whole time. But he didn't. He was drafted somehow in 34% of leagues, which never made much sense. 202nd ranked player this season. 190th in points. He averaged 13 points with 2 threes and 3 rebounds and 0.9 steals, shot 43 and 84. He did go on a hot streak early on. He was rosterable for a period, but he's Dillon Brooks and he went back to being Dillon Brooks. His comps, year 10, Avery Bradley. That was Lakers Avery Bradley, championship year Avery Bradley. And year 6, Jay Crowder. That was Cavs Jazz Crowder. 63rd percentile EPM, 53rd in CPM, and I highlighted this because his offensive load was 39th percentile. He just didn't do anything offensively, and that was the worry. It's not that we wanted Dillon Brooks to do that because we know that leads to suboptimal outcomes. But he was able to, and again, I commend him for doing this. Knowing your role, and like The Rock says, shutting your mouth. Now, he didn't really shut his mouth, but I think I don't know if he was worth it, but maybe he was worth it for the Rockets. The problem still is here, like he blocks Eason, he blocks Whitmore, he blocks Amen. And at some point, probably after this season, he will cede his starting role, I'm guessing. But for now, I don't see him moving out of that starting group. Maybe you'll think they'll just move on from him, put him into a bench role, then you'll get Whitmore / Eason / Thompson starting. I don't think so. So let's talk about the other players of note, because there are a lot. And there are a lot of guys that we love, and one of those is Tari lost season. It's always a hard discussion for me on Tari Eason because I liked Tari Eason a lot as a prospect. I liked Tari Eason a lot as a fantasy player, but as often happens, and it makes me feel like a hater, is that the hype goes through the roof. As a rookie, it happened. He was playing all these minutes in the preseason. I was like, I don't see how it happens in the regular season. People expected him to get 30 minutes a night this season, playing over Şengün and Smith, because they love what he does. He's a solid player. I think he can be a starter, but I do think we need to settle down. He's 23 years of age. He played only 22 games at 22 minutes after they found a tumor in his leg. Seemed like some mismanagement there, but I'm glad that he's okay and they got that out and he should be ready to go. Also, a reminder, he played 82 games as a rookie. Turns out, playing 82 games doesn't mean that you play them every year. I don't know. Maybe. Some people might think that. Everyone. Eason, though, in 22 minutes, 123rd in -1, 137th in points. And this is why people love him for fantasy. 10 points, 7 rebounds. Great rebounds for a small forward guy. 1.4 steals and 0.9 blocks. Be really cautious. He is the guy. He is one of the guys that a traditional straight 9-cat ranking will tell you is unbelievably better than so many guys that are actually better than him. Because A, high volume steals and blocks. B, low turnovers. Forget the fact that you get 1 assist and under 10 points and under a 3. It doesn't reflect in those rankings that way. So one of those guys is always going to look way better than the actual production is. He shot 64 from the line only, just 50% on his 2s and 36 on his 3s. I'll go right down to the bottom of this graphic. His shot quality, 22nd percentile. He's just a bad shooter. And that is, like, we love the hustle. We love the defense. We love the defense event creation. Offensive rebound is strong, but he can't shoot. And he needs to be able to. The 2 comps for him, one of them was ACL legend DeJuan Blair, which I was like, that's not great. The second one was year 2 of Jalen Johnson, but we know what happened in year 3 for Jalen Johnson. But I'm not sure the path is there for Eason to do that. Still really like him, but I also just think we need to just calm down on him. 78th percentile EPM, 67th CPM. Again, very good player. Would start on a lot of teams. Not as clear cut here, and the lack of passing, ball movement, shooting usage can be a problem. And he's not alone, because we're going to talk Amen Thompson. I love Amen Thompson. I had Amen Thompson at 3 in this draft class. I had Amen Thompson in tier 2 for rookie dynasty drafts. I had Thompson ahead of his brother. I also had a men behind Asar for redraft because the opportunity wasn't going to be there and opportunity was not there. 22 minutes a night, played 62 games, age 21. He's older as well as a second-year guy. He is older. But like Eason, he played 22 minutes and still ranked 135th in category leagues, 140th in points leagues because he just does stuff unbelievably. I think he probably will be a point guard, but he can play the 3. He played some center. He can play a little bit on the wing, but ideally he is a point guard. And there are still just too many guys in front of him, and you'll see why there's problems here. 9.5 points, 6.6 rebounds, 2.6 assists in 22 minutes, 1.3 steals, 0.6 blocks. Shot 54 and 68. The 68 actually better than I thought it would be. Almost 60% on his twos, but he shot 14% on threes. Now, he doesn't take any of them, but this is the Russell Westbrook situation. You need everybody else to shoot, and he functionally plays as a center a lot of the time. So when we talk about Şengün and Green fitting together and running the offense and all that sort of stuff, maybe there's incompatibility. How do Amen and Şengün go together? When Şengün's under 30%, even though he's a somewhat willing three-point shooter and Amen just can't hit him, then it's harder to play Amen in that functional offensive center role. I love him. I think Amen is going to be a top 25 fantasy player. I think it's going to take some manipulation and tweaking from a team, but I think we talk a lot about this, about these guys that when they're given the chance, they put up numbers. And my pushback often is, but if you give them that chance, the team is bad. So therefore that chance will probably never come unless it's in a situation for 6 weeks where a team is trying to increase their draft pick odds. Or that they just don't have the other option in place, Brandon Ingram. So that's that. I have that concern. With Amen, I actually think he is going to be good enough where you go, all right, we do need to put the pieces around him because he is this good. He is dynamic. He is the best athlete in the NBA. He is visionary offensively and defensively. He rebounds and steals and blocks and passes and scores and finishes better than so many other guys. And we need the right players around him. I think he can be that guy. But we're not there. When I do the crafted similarities of players, I try to keep it to position. And I was like, I don't really know what position to do for Amen. Like, he played some point guard, yes. He played at the 2, yes. He played center. He played small forward. So how did I judge him? Well, the best comp that they came up with was rookie year Ben Simmons, and it makes complete sense. At least he's willing to take some threes. They don't go in, but otherwise, yeah, I can see that. And the other one was year 3 of Greg Monroe. All right, Greg Monroe again, huh? It's a Greg Monroe show. If I narrow the positions down, things get like really weird. Really weird. If I take like the center, power forwards, small forwards out of it and just run the guard position, and I think Amen is going to be a guard, but again, it's a weird fit. The best comps were 2007 Trevor Ariza and 2015 Giannis Antetokounmpo. If I run it just as a point guard, who comes out? Well, it's 1999 Larry Hughes and 2018 DeJounte Murray. Just an intriguing, just such an interesting player that I love. People were so out on him at the beginning of this season, amazingly. And there were people telling me, man, I might like actually just drop him in my dynasty league, and you have to be insane. Again, that means there's probably an issue with the rules in that league that you even consider that. But I still think the ceiling here is absolutely sky high. You might disagree with it. Much higher ceiling than Brandon Miller to me, much higher. And higher than Scoot too. But it is going to take some work and some patience. And I'm not sure he's walking into 30 minutes next season. Where does it come from? That's why we need to see a lot of the off-season stuff play out. And then it brings us into this guy who inexplicably fell to like number, was it 19 or 20 in the draft, Cam Whitmore, based on some shoddy information from his former coach, which is just unbelievable. Maybe there is this ongoing or lingering knee time bomb that is going to end his career after 7 or 8 years. That is the worry. That is what some of the stuff that was passed around that I heard, as well as some of the other stuff about, Yeah, oh, he's a shy boy. He's very quiet, and that's what, which is weird. But everything that we know that Cam Whitmore can and can't do from Villanova, we saw that play out. He's not even 20. 4 years younger than Dalton Connect. 47 games only, had some knee problems, played only 19 minutes in the G League to begin the year. 241st in -1, 209th in points. He averaged 12 points a game in 19 minutes. 4 rebounds, 1.7 threes, 0.6 steals. Shot 68 from the line, which is a little weird. 45 from the field, but 54 on twos and 36 on threes as a volume rookie is unbelievably impressive. His 2 best comps were rookie year Quentin Richardson and probably more intriguingly, rookie year Goose, Anthony Edwards. Now, they're not the same body shape. Edwards is more of a 3-4, Goose is more of a 2-3. And the one big difference in the way that Edwards is getting... Edwards, again, you look at Edwards now versus as a rookie or versus in college, the work that Anthony Edwards has put in to change his game has been immense. Because Anthony Edwards couldn't pass and just took contested mid-range twos. And that's not what happens now. The problem here is that Whitmore can't pass. 54th percentile EPM, 48th in crafted, but his passer rating 9th percentile. Does not pass. Did not pass at Villanova. Does not get free throw attempts enough. He gets steals. His deflections are great. He scores. He'll shoot. But where is the role? Does he play over Brooks, which means he plays over Eason? Does he play over Smith? Play over Şengün, and Smith plays at center. So we've got Amen, Eason, and Whitmore, who, if they were on Charlotte, Detroit, the Spurs, the Wizards, we'd be playing 32 minutes a night and be top 50 players, really without any hesitation. But that's just not likely to happen here. At some point, there's going to be a reckoning about, well, is Eason better than Jabari, or is Whitmore better than Brooks, or is Amen better than Green? I'm just not sure that's going to happen next season. But just a wild plus. And get pick 3. Where's that bloke going to play? Rob Dillingham, Reed Shepherd, maybe it is Klingon. Rissa Shea. I don't know. Where do they play? Whoever they pick at 3, if they don't trade that pick. Also, so every team, we're looking to trade the pick. You know, bro, if you're going to trade the pick, somebody needs to be willing to trade with you. And we hear this every year about the top picks. None of them move. They don't get traded really ever. But we hear this all the time. They're going to move the pick. Cool. It just doesn't happen. I guess we're happy to just sit with our pick. It just very rarely happens. So the Rockets might say they're going to move pick 3, but the offers might be just so bad. I guess we'll just get the talent. That's how it usually works out. Last player that I'm going to talk about is Jacques Landale. I'm not going to talk Jeff Green or Nate Williams or Boban or Bullock or Holiday, but Landale's interesting. They made a bet on him to be their backup center. In the end, it was Jeff Green who got that initial job, and then Landale did get that spot later on. He's 28. So he's much older than you might think, because he came into the NBA late. 56 games, 14 minutes. He was 335th in -1. He averaged 5 and 3 with 0.6 blocks, but shot 52 and 80. And as a big man, those numbers are intriguing. His 2 highest similarities were Hot Rod Williams, year 5, and Kem Birch. Remember Kem Birch, the big tree? Year 5 as well. 77th percentile EPM, 69th percentile crafted. But what I loved was his rim defense, 89th percentile. Landale showed flashes in Phoenix the year before, and when he had the opportunity when Şengün went down this season, I thought he was very, very serviceable. A solid backup big who, if you call on him, is useful. But the problem here now is that Steven Adams exists. And that is a variable that I haven't really talked about probably enough through this show. So any minutes that you wanted Eason to play small ball center, or Jabari to play at the 5 because you wanted Eason more in and more Whitmore, what the hell does Adams do? Because I don't think Adams and Şengün can play together. So does Şengün play 28 minutes and Adams plays 20? Does Adams play 16 as a backup only? What the hell happens? This team is getting to that stage where there are too many guys and there are people who are going to be cut down and you don't know how it's going to work. So Landale was strong, and other teams should maybe inquire about him as a backup because there are just no opportunities for him now. And that is the opportunity. As I push the wrong button, that's okay. We'll hit the right one now. The opportunity for this show to end. And for you to tell your friends about it, but also to subscribe, to hit the thumbs up, to leave your comments, and to give that 5-star review. Who's up tomorrow? It's the Sacramento Kings, who their fan base had some interesting things to say over the offseason and some changes in opinions now. And we'll dig into a lot of that as we get into the show. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.